Well, hello there, this is Kermit the Frog.
I'm Captain Kirk.
Fascinating.
I'm a doctor, not a mechanic.
Thank you, love you. Mwah.
Most illogical.
Aye, sir.
Well, that was different. Yep, lousy, but different.
Places, please, and here we go.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, bears, Cardassians, and things, to episode 33 of the MuppeTrek podcast. I'm Steve.
And I'm Jarman, and we're here to compare, contrast, and confer about our two favorite franchises. And what are those, Steve?
Well, that's the Muppets and Star Trek. We have been doing one-to-one reviews of the Muppet Show and Star Trek, the original series.
And tonight we're covering the Muppet Show with special guest star Dom DeLuise and Star Trek original series episode Mirror, Mirror. So quite an episode we have for you today.
That's right. But before we get to the main discussion, Jarman, do we have any feedback?
We actually have some unusual feedback. It's kind of fun.
Oh, no.
We use a service for this podcast called Bidalgo Call. You might not have heard of it because Bidalgo is a voiceover marketplace where one place I had found voiceover jobs in the past. So it's like the people post their jobs there and you audition for them. And it's international, unlike the ones I use that are just US based. So a lot of companies in Europe trying to find American voices, they use this website. And that's how I found this calling service. And it's a high quality, much better than Skype or Zoom or that kind of thing. That's why we use it for the podcast, because I can get Steve's voice from California over here in Florida. I can get his voice in high quality. So we've been using this free call service over a browser for a long time. And all of a sudden I get an email from the founder of Bidalgo.
Oh, Lord.
And he says to us, I was scared too at first. He says, hi there. I saw that you might have used Bidalgo Call. There was a channel called A Play on Nerds, so I thought you maybe used it. So he apparently found our website and contacted us through the website. He says, in case you did, I hope everything worked fine. Also, I'm the co-founder of retroplace.com, a marketplace and free collection management tool. I would be flattered if you checked that one out and see if it suits you as a mention on your podcast. All my best, Armin Harstadter. I think it's how you pronounce his last name. He's from Germany.
So what's it called one more time?
It's called retroplace.com. And it's actually a marketplace where people can sell their own retro video games. So that's why he thought it'd be appropriate for our podcast.
Oh, and systems and accessories.
Yeah, it's kind of like a eBay, but just for retro gaming, which is really cool.
All right, here's my review right now. I'm going to type in an obscure N64 game.
Oh, here we go.
We're going to see what comes up. Oh, they got it. They got it. Blast Cores.
Wow.
N64.
Somebody
multiple
has it.
copies, including in Germany, the US, the UK. Wow, this is actually really cool.
Isn't it a cool service? And what's funny is that I've known about this guy for a long time because he pretty much single-handedly runs this international website, and he's often celebrated in the voiceover community because he doesn't allow super low rates, so he can't be undersold as voice talent. So people like him a lot in the voiceover community, and he's always been such a nice guy. And so I had written him back and said, hey, and I'm sorry we've been using your voice service for so long for our podcast, but Steve and I had tried many other voice things that didn't quite work out. Or they cost too much, or they were just not as good a quality. They dropped calls. And so Bidalgo has just been the most steady one we've had to use. And he was like, no, totally use it for free. It's what it's there for. And luckily I still pay for the service to be on his website normally. So I feel like I'm not guilty for doing that. But we should plug him on the podcast because he did find us and took the time to write an email. But it's a cool website too. So retroplace.com.
Check out retroplace.com. I'm just scratching the surface and it looks really, really cool. And also check out Bidalgo Call.
Yeah, if you're doing podcasts,
I highly recommend it. We've been using it for years at this point.
It's kind of like a little secret, so we don't want the podcast community to know about it. But if you're doing podcasts and you want to take it to the next level,
true.
Bidalgo Call's there, and he'll eventually start charging for it.
Eventually, but hopefully we'll have some sort of synergistic thing where he'll let us do it for free.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we brought the people to it.
That's right, the people.
So not really Muppets or Star Trek related, but it was feedback because of MuppeTrek, us being on Bidalgo all the time, that he found us. So
that's really funny.
It was really funny. So tell us about our guest star this week, Steve, on the Muppet Show.
Oh man, Dom DeLuise, a Brooklyn boy who grew up to be a famous actor, chef, producer, and director. He was kind of famous for being famous in the 60s and 70s. He hitched his wagon to big filmmakers like Mel Brooks and did a bunch of projects opposite of Burt Reynolds right at his height that really kind of took him over the top. What is our generation known from? Well, a little bit later in his career, he hitched on to the Don Bluth animated classic films that a lot of us grew up with and performed in movies like All Dogs Go to Heaven, An American Tail, and The Secret of NIMH.
Oh, those movies. Yeah, for sure.
But this week on the Muppet Show, on stage, Kermit introduces Dom DeLuise, but first, Miss Piggy has a musical number, Don't Dilly Dally on the Way, a rousing song that even Statler and Waldorf get into. But the crowd is really, really into it, like overly enthusiastic. Kermit comes back out, introduces Dom on the planet Coosbane, where he's greeted by some pink mole-like characters that abuse him and drive him nuts until he is eventually pulled into the ground and becomes one of them. Animal then gets a drum solo on stage, is short and sweet, and ends with an unseen drum sounding that he didn't hit. That confuses him. Up next is a veterinarian's hospital, where this week the patient is the cow, but we barely get to hear any jokes because Miss Piggy, once again, the audience is like cheering for her and ruining the sketch. We get a few cow puns, and they milk it for all it's worth. After this, we get a performance from Slim Wilson and Lou, Henrietta's Wedding, about a surprise wedding where they don't know who the groom is or where the wedding will be. Following this, we get a performance from Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem. Don't blame the dynamite. It's a real groovy jam, my man. Following this is Dom acting as the director of an institute for rehabilitating monsters. He feeds an ugly monster in a bassinet and then plays the song for something chained to the wall and then throws food across the room at a monster in a cage. This all goes haywire. He eventually loses control of the institute. Mm-hmm. Finally, Kermit brings out Dom for a closing number. Dom asks to bring out a very upset Miss Piggy, who the audience still just cheers wildly for. Although Piggy's down, Dom reminds her, hey, we got us. And that's the closing musical number.
A fun number.
Backstage this week, most of the plot centers around the fact that Piggy has paid off the audience to cheer for her. And that explains the crazy reactions throughout the show. Even Scooter's in on it, letting Kermit know that she's got letters from admirers and flowers and candy and stuff being sent to her.
I think it's even hinted that Scooter's the one who fronted the money to pay them off.
And Kermit eventually wrings this out of Scooter and lets Piggy go. She basically begs to come back, and Kermit says, well, I can bring you back, but it'll be at a lower rate, because if you have all this money to pay the crowd, you obviously don't need my money.
Ugh, it's pretty cold, man.
It's pretty cold. At the closing, Kermit thanks Dom one last time. They thank the audience members who weren't paid off. Piggy comes out and threatens to physically assault her employer, and that is what we call the Muppet Show.
Yes.
Jarman, what did you think of this week's episode?
So I think it goes to show how much audience participation can influence how much you enjoy something. Because when Miss Piggy's song first started, I was like, oh, this is one of those typical songs they kind of do, which is kind of just there and kind of boring. But then the audience starts getting really into it, and I found myself like, you know what? I like this number. I like this number a lot. And I was like, and I realized it's just like a bland kind of, old song, but I really maybe enjoy it more watching Statler and Waldorf sing it. And remember,
I think that's one of the other things. You so rarely get to see those two actually enjoy the show that when it happens, it's extra enjoyable.
And rarely it's only when like a guest is performing, then they'll enjoy a guest, but they will never enjoy just the Muppets by themselves. Yeah. So
these you'll see the theme, and I've seen even this for this all these like old time music hall songs
that gets really them going. Into. Yeah, that's true, which makes sense
from their youth as young men,
which they never were. And I thought the alien scene was a bunch of fun. We've had some duds from that alien planet. What's it called? The planet
Coosbane.
Coosbane. Yeah, we've had some dud sketches from there, but this one was a lot of fun, especially when he falls in and becomes one himself and is like, yeah,
that was good. That.
And it really showed off DeLuise's like, physical humor and stuff like that. He's so good at that.
He really got to play it big and his thing.
He's just ridiculous. And the Henrietta's Wedding song I really enjoy because I'm kind of a fan of those folksy Prairie Home Companion kind of songs, and that really felt like one of those.
Good definition.
Yeah, and so it just was enjoyable and good harmonies, and not often do they have a female voice actually singing with a male voice. So I think you said there's like only one person who does a female voice in the Muppets.
Yeah, there's like 2 or 3.
Okay, there's like 2 or 3.
Not many.
And of course, the monster shelter thing was just hilarious.
Just Dom getting to run around the room and go crazy.
Like his heart rate must have been through the roof after that was over. So yeah,
that's all the cocaine.
Probably. But overall, I love Dom DeLuise from his Mel Brooks movies, and he's such a good fit for the Muppets. I think he fit it right in. His little bit of singing talent and the rest of his physical comedy. It was just one of the top episodes from this season so far, if not what we've seen thus far, 2 seasons. What about you?
This was good. I felt like they really boasted that Dom was like a singer and performer and blah, 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 but we only got the one real musical number for him, and it wasn't that good.
That's true. I didn't see him as really as a full singer.
That's the thing. Like, he literally said it out loud. Like, not only is he a comedian and a performer, but a singer and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, oh, Dom DeLuise can sing? Like, I was real excited. And then we got to We Got Us, and I was like, oh, all right.
He kind of talk-singed half of it, you know.
He kind of did, yeah. Mm-hmm. So in that way, I think like they didn't stretch. I'm honestly missing like the talk spot.
That's true. Does that come back
in these seasons? Maybe different variations, iterations of it, but I miss having those slower, quieter moments. That's just a dialogue.
Yeah, take a break from the action that's happening and just kind of sit down.
So we'll see. Maybe they'll replace that in some way, but I kind of miss it this season.
Yeah, I thought that was a staple. I thought I remember seeing a lot more production stills of other celebrities sitting there just on the stage by themselves with Kermit. So
I can't remember. Maybe they revamp it.
I think it comes back.
Remember. We'll get to it.
I'm glad you don't remember, so it can be a surprise.
Yeah. So let's talk about Muppet music this week. Don't Dilly Dally on the Way. It's sometimes called My Old Man. It's another musical song made famous by Mary Lloyd. Piggy's performed a few of her other songs on the show. Funny story about Mary Lloyd. She was engaged to this guy named Dylan, and they were traveled to the U.S. to do this tour. And he did all of their paperwork as Mr. and Mrs. Dillon, but they didn't actually get married. They get to America, they show her ID, and they realize that she is not Miss Dillon. So they take them to Ellis Island and put them under investigation. They both get charged with crimes under what's called the White Slave Act, which was an early act put in place to stop the human trafficking of women into the U.S.
Oh, that's a good thing.
They both had to pay a $300 fine and make agreements that they would not live with each other while they were in the U.S.
Unusual.
Henrietta's Wedding by Murray and Miranda. Murray was a classic violinist from South Africa who found fame when record companies suddenly needed people to record in Afrikaans. He was then approached about translating Afrikaans songs into English, and then he met a Dutch immigrant named Miranda, and they performed as a duo for nearly 30 years.
Oh, interesting.
This one's weird. Don't Blame the Dynamite, written by Donald George Sambulieu. Really had to dig for this one. He graduated from Tufts and spent some time as a production manager on Broadway shows like Oh Calcutta. And then he was a studio carpenter for Montel Williams.
Weird.
Somehow he wrote this song. There's also reference that he wrote songs that were performed on Sesame Street, but I can't find any record of that.
Weird.
Aside from the fact that in his obituary, his family says it. But I can't find a record anywhere else.
That is very strange. He was like a set carpenter for Montel Williams and then writes songs.
This one was definitely him. Don't Blame the Dynamite. So it's weird. I don't know how it happened.
That was the Dr. Teeth one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We Got Us by writer Walter Marks in the musical Golden Rainbow, which is the story of a man raising his son alone in Las Vegas, who then falls in love with his widowed sister who comes to visit. Walter Marks, however, better known for writing the old crooner standard I've Got to Be Me. He also wrote We Got Us.
Gotcha.
Jarman, what's your favorite Muppeteering moment this week?
I was thinking about it has to be a tie between, I'm sorry if that's stealing one of yours, but the aliens popping up and then the big monster scene, because both just required a lot of coordination and timing. And yeah, just it must have taken a lot of takes, or they're just that good at what they do. So it was both very impressive.
I'm going to go with the alien, the Merlodop, just because I'm finding that I'm extra impressed when it's a bunch of people under a floor. Yeah.
Especially when he put his hand under it and someone else's hand went up with the same watch on, like that was really impressive.
Right. The coordination, all those gags just took a ton of coordination.
Oh, yeah.
Really impressive.
I agree.
So, Jarman, tell us about the original series episode we watched this week.
All right. So we have a big one that most, even somewhat Trek fans will be aware of, Mirror Mirror, which introduces us to the long-running, repetitive thing of the mirror universe in Star Trek, which still exists to this day on new Star Trek series. Spoilers. So anyways, we start off with Kirk, McCoy, Scotty, and Uhura, who are on the planet Hulken, trying to convince them to let them mine their dilithium, but they refuse, saying that they can't take the chance that it could eventually be used for evil. And Kirk is disappointed, but he agrees to leave them be, which surprises them. But they're like, hey, we're Starfleet. We don't do that kind of thing. So keep your dilithium. Then, at the same time, the planet is experiencing a really bad magnetic storm. So just as the crew tries to beam up to the Enterprise, something goes wrong, and they are instead beamed onto the Enterprise in a mirror universe. Whoa! They don't know that yet, but everything looks different. They have different uniforms, and Spock has a goatee.
They should know that pretty quick.
They know something's wrong, yeah. As they arrive, Mirror Spock tells Kirk that they are about to barrage Hulkin with missiles as punishment for not handing over their dilithium. And they're going to tie it over to what's now known as the Terran Empire and not the Federation. So they obviously immediately know something's wrong. And thankfully, the Prime Universe crew keeps their mouth shut, even though they realize something is terribly wrong. And Kirk manages to convince Mirror Spock not to devastate Hulkin just yet, and to tell the Enterprise crew to follow him to the sickbay so they can assess what's going on and figure out what's happening. So they figure out they've been sent to an alternate universe due to the magnetic storm and the transporters, and they figure out that they will have a small window very soon to transport back to their own universe, and they'll have to coordinate it carefully without being found out by their mirror universe counterparts. So it's a very dangerous game. But Mirror Spock is very suspicious of Kirk ordering a delay in the destruction of the Hulkins, so he contacts Starfleet, which tells him that if Kirk does not destroy the Hulkins after this delay, then Spock is to kill him and take his place. So there's even more of a time crunch. So back in the real Enterprise, though, which is a kind of funny scene, you see the bad Kirk, Uhura, Bones, and Scotty.
That was pretty abrupt and funny.
Yeah, that's like a real short scene. I wish they would have shown more of like.
Get your hands off me!
They're like immediately infuriated, barbaric, crazy, and so they immediately are found out, and Spock takes them all and puts them in the brig. So they're pretty much handled on that end. But back in the Mirror Universe, Kirk is nearly killed when Mirror Chekhov and his henchmen try to ambush him, and they try to kill him so he can, everyone can move up in ranks. So they kind of move up in ranks like the Klingons do, which you'll find out later on down the line. But thankfully, some other crewmen take down Chekhov's men who are hoping to gain Kirk's favor by saving him.
Kirk's personal guard or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Real weird.
But he just knocks that guy out and says, "No, I'm not giving you any credit for this. You were helping him out." So Kirk gets back to his quarters, and he finds a beautiful woman there, Marlena, who calls herself the captain's woman. And apparently she and Mirror Kirk were in a relationship. But when regular Kirk shows her lots of kindness and it makes her very suspicious of him. But at the same time, she's like, I don't know what's changed in him, but I'm having these feelings towards him, which will be important
I like
later.
how he hits me less now.
Isn't that nice? And while he's there, she shows him a device in his quarters that apparently he got from some alien race earlier on that lets him monitor anyone in the ship, and he can make them disappear and basically kill them at his own will. So it's a pretty awesome device. But he tells her not to use it on anybody, and he has some big plan, so he tells her just to hold off. So Kirk goes engineering to help set up their plan for escape, but Mirror Spock notices that he's tinkering in engineering and catches him there, and takes him to sickbay, where the rest of the Prime Universe gang are all hanging out waiting for Kirk. And they immediately try to attack Mirror Spock, and it takes all of them to take him down because he's a strong Vulcan. But eventually they take him down, and he's injured so badly that Bones says he's not going to leave until he makes sure this Mirror Spock is stable and not going to die. It's taking him forever, so Bones just tells him, go ahead and go to the transporters. I'll meet you there in 5 minutes. But of course, once they leave, Spock wakes up and he forces a mind meld on Bones. And that way he learns who they really are and what their plan is, which is a pretty cool scene, but it's also mind rape, whatever. So Mirror Spock,
only
a little bit. Mirror Spock takes Bones to the transporter room, and he helps the crew get back to their own universe because he wants his regular captain back. But before they leave, Kirk tries to reason with Mirror Spock, trying to convince him that this Empire system is illogical and it will eventually fail. And Spock kind of agrees. And that Kirk says it only takes one man to start a revolution and that he could be that man. And Mirror Spock says he'll consider what he says. And then he transports him back to his own universe. And at last, they all get back on the regular bridge of the real Enterprise. And after making fun of Spock for a while, a new yeoman enters the bridge. And to Kirk's surprise, it is Marlena from the other universe, but it's her copy in this universe. And she just transferred to the Enterprise. And Kirk seems very taken with her, but we never see her again. So that's the end of Mirror Mirror. So what did you think of that one, Steve?
So I thought this was a very, very strong episode. And while I don't think it's the best episode so far, I can think of one or two I like better than it. It's definitely up there. And I think this is the best they've done of showing us and not telling us.
Oh, that's true.
And they had a lot of major impact with very slight changes that made the picture complete in this other universe, which was very impressive. And they established it very quickly. The insignias, even just seeing that insignia, like the sword coming down, like, that there's a difference there.
Right.
The darker light, even them just making the lighting darker. Minor uniform differences, more skin being shown.
What's the booth like? You have to mention the booth. They have the pain booth.
Punishment booth.
Yeah.
But not only that, like the punishment badge, and like when the guy screws up and Spock disciplines him immediately, everyone has a weapon on. Like, that's not normal.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's doing formal saluting. They did a lot of rapid fire small things that added up to a big picture that established very quickly what we were getting into, and it was really impressive. They did a really good job.
Mm-hmm. Must have a lot of budget for this episode, I imagine, because just all the
slight differences.
New costumes.
Some of them were smart and small, though.
Right.
Because think of it. Because chances are, like, that, that insignia was probably a stencil.
Yeah, and just add a sash to their costume and that kind of thing.
Yeah, they added a sash to the costume. It doesn't cost anything to change lighting.
Right.
And it all added up to this real good picture. There were some really good, funny moments I really enjoyed between Bones and Kirk after Kirk gets ambushed and he goes to the medical bay. Bones says, "What's that?" It's called blood. It was real good.
Doctor.
I love the back on the Enterprise. They just have it under control. Like, I loved that. That was such a good, funny cut. Like, you don't laugh that much in Star Trek, but I laughed at that moment.
Oh, good.
It was interesting realizing that in the movies is not the first time that McCoy has been mind melded by a Spock.
That's true. I thought
Maybe
about that too.
Maybe not the Spock in his universe, but a Spock.
Mm-hmm. He's been there before.
Things I disliked that were harder, more difficult. If the universe is so vastly different, and I'm talking about like societally different, then the ship, there's no way the ship would be exactly the same.
Right. They
would need more room for the murder ball courts or something. And it would push. So the fact that they're like, everything's exactly the same except us, Captain. It's like, no, that's just not possible.
It would look like a Klingon ship, more likely.
The Kirk and Sulu fight was such a letdown, and it was so quick. I thought we were going to get to see like a real Kirk Sulu fight, and Kirk like grabs his arm and chops him, and he's like disabled. It was nothing.
The Kirk chop, Kirk Fu.
And it's hard to imagine. So with this society that they set up in this like evil bizarro universe about like, oh, when the big one falls, two of us get to rank up and blah, blah, blah. Like Kirk would get there and no one would be recognizable. Everyone would have been like killed or betrayed. There'd be so much turnover that no one would know how to do anything. Because everyone would always be moving to a new job because someone got betrayed or killed or disappeared.
Funny. They've made that argument about the Klingons because in future, like Next Generation, it's established that they have that system in the Klingon ships that if you kill your superior officer, you become that position. Which you're right, like it would cause chaos. So, like,
not just chaos, but just like nobody would know how to do anything.
Yeah.
Nobody. And maybe that's like the joke in all of this. And that's why the humans in the Federation always have an edge over the Klingons, is because the Klingons keep killing off their most experienced people.
I would totally agree with that.
Over and over and over again.
It's not
effective. It's always the young and stupid and ambitious ones that are in charge of the Klingons.
Taking chances.
Killing people, taking ranks, getting killed.
That's true.
So there were a few harder to swallow pills in here, but overall, I can easily say that this is very quickly in my top 3 episodes.
Nice. Yeah, I was saying, I think what I noticed too is there wasn't really like a lot of lull moments like there are in other episodes where they repeat things, or there was
pacing was great.
Yeah, no boring moments. Every moment meant something.
The only slow moment was when they got to her and him in his quarters.
I kind of like that it slowed down a little bit there. She was hot.
I was fine that it slowed down. I wish there would have been more cutaway.
Mm.
And that's something more reminiscent. They did a lot of that in season 1. These like long scenes in Kirk's quarters.
Right.
They're just slower and weird. And we haven't seen a lot of it in season 2 until this point. I feel like this is one of the ones.
And you're right. They could have cut away to something else and then come back to that scene. It would have felt
just less anything. And I think maybe that's the failure of the B plot from back on the real Enterprise. Maybe they shouldn't have gotten them under control so quickly.
Yeah, or at least cut back and the other crew was trying to escape from the brig or something. They could have done that.
Or cause some additional mischief before they were caught, or whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe that was just a failure of the B plot.
I agree. I thought also great episode for Uhura in particular. She had a lot to do and a lot of lines, and she was a badass, and she just took charge. And I thought it was pretty cool.
Seductress.
Yeah, and she looked good.
They set that up a little bit hard, but I'm glad they at least paid it off.
Right, and also even everyone else had a moment too. Sulu, Chekhov, just everyone had their own.
I love
moments.
that this was the first time that Chekhov wasn't like the worried little boy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like in every episode before this, he's been the worried undercrewman.
And he's supposed to be played pretty young, but it's good that he took charge in this scene. He's like he was trying to stage a coup.
That was really nice.
Yeah, so I think we overall favorable reviews for both of these things, these episodes.
Oh yeah.
So trivia for Mirror Mirror. It took about a month to complete this particular episode. After filming had begun, Barbara Luna, who played Marlena, was diagnosed with strep throat, and since the script called for her to kiss Captain Kirk, they had to postpone the kissing scene for 3 weeks until she was medically cleared, since they couldn't risk William Shatner getting infected. And that's a long time to put off shooting. That probably cost a lot of money too. Star Trek was not usually allowed to show women's navels. Neither was any other show at the time, actually. That was a big thing with Barbara Eden on I Dream of Jeannie never showed her belly button.
Yeah, there were 2 bellies shown here.
Yeah, and so reportedly this was accomplished by filming while a PA took the standards and practices representative to lunch while they filmed those scenes. So they get that sneaky navel in there.
Take him out for a steak and a lap dance, keep him out of the studio for a few hours.
Exactly.
It was a different time.
Actor Vic Perrin played Tharn, who was the original guy in charge of the Balkans, the Nalkans, whatever they're called in the beginning.
Yeah.
He did the voice of Nomad in the previous episode in The Changeling.
Oh, very cool.
So it's kind of neat. This inspired the name of the progressive alternate rock band called Spock's Beard, which apparently is a thing. I want to listen to them now. And this is the second time we hear Bones say, "I'm a doctor, not a..." where he says, "I'm a doctor, not an engineer." And what's funny is that Bryce Dallas Howard, in her character in Terminator Salvation, says the same thing. "I'm a doctor, not an engineer," probably in deference to this episode. So just a little trivia there for Mirror Mirror. So do we have any Trek connections this week, Steve?
Okay, man. Do I? So Bravo Profiles, which was the first thing produced by the Bravo network when it came into existence in 2001. Their first profile was on Gene Wilder and included interviews from both Dom DeLuise and Leonard Nimoy.
Oh.
In a 1992 review of Star Trek Undiscovered Country, the reviewer likened Shatner and Christopher Plummer's acting to Dom DeLuise and Delta Burke being put in charge of a plate of Twinkies in regards to how much they were chewing the scenery.
Oh my God, that's really offensive in many ways.
Right? That was a review, like in a paper.
That's terrible.
Dom DeLuise. So the Bluth film classics really opened up a lot of doors here. Mm-hmm. For The Secret of Nim, Dom DeLuise played the voice of Jeremy, and the voice of Martin, the son, was played by a young Will Wheaton.
Nice.
In A Troll in Central Park, Dom DeLuise played the troll, but Philip Glasser played the young boy Gus in it, but he was also in Star Trek Insurrection. He was in a deleted scene, unfortunately, and he played a young version of F. Murray Abraham's character.
Oh, I see. Gotcha.
And F. Murray Abraham, as we remember, made a cameo in Muppets from Space.
That's true.
Bam.
Look at all those connections.
And then in An American Tale, Dom DeLuise played Tiger, and then Christopher Plummer played Henri, and he was also in Star Trek 6.
What do you know?
Bam. And he chewed the scenery.
It's so weird because I was putting my girlfriend to bed tonight. She was watching, what do you call it? Not Riff Tracks, but the other one. Mystery Science Theater 3000. And Christopher Plummer was in one of the movies. It was called Firehead, and it was terrible.
Nice. Yes.
So do we have any similarities between these two episodes?
I mean, they're basically the same episode. Let's just be real.
Of course. We all saw it.
We were all there. So Dom DeLuise has to successfully become one of the aliens that he is fighting against. Just like Kirk has to try to blend in with the familiar aliens he finds himself surrounded by.
That was one of mine.
Bam.
Both have people talking about moving. The captain's woman talks about having the yeoman coming to move out her things when she's pissed off with Kirk. And Piggy sings a song about a moving van.
Okay.
Yeah.
Both feature someone trying to further their position. Piggy via her clever ruse and paying the audience, and Chekhov and Sulu via sabotage and insurrection.
There we go. And in that same vein, I have both have a woman kicking ass, Uhura kicking a lot of ass in this episode, and Piggy, as usual, beating people to death.
Just beating her employers and physically assaulting people.
As she always does. Oh, now I hear something.
What the hell's that?
Transporter malfunction. Transporter malfunction.
All right, it's part of the show where we transport one character from one episode to the other episode and vice versa. So what you got for us, Steve?
So I've got the Merlidops from Planet Coosbane coming over and replacing the entire Bizarro crew. And all the Merlidops would have goatees.
Perfect.
And visually, it'd be really funny for Kirk and McCoy and Scotty and her to come off the transporter surrounded by these things and then have Kirk be like, I think something's off.
What is it, though? It's weird.
Merlidop. Spock seems strange.
Merlidop.
Yeah.
That would be amusing. I miss Piggy trading places with the captain's woman because it's very much in her character of trying to always please Kermit. Same kind of thing. She's trying to please Kirk and make him stay the captain's woman because that's what she deserves as a queen, as she is.
Nice. That's true. She does deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
Trek to Muppets. I've got Scooter being replaced by Bizarro Spock with the goatee, playing the straight man to Piggy as he's taking care of all these things for her, only to stray and betray her at the end to advance his own position.
Mine was very similar because I had evil Spock trading places with Kermit in this episode because Kermit was really cold and calculating with Miss Piggy in this episode. So it
really was. That play at the end was cold.
It fit really well with evil Spock. So I think that worked out pretty well.
Okay.
So that brings us to the end of episode 33 of the MuppeTrek podcast.
Join us next time for The Muppet Show with special guest Teresa Brewer.
And original series episode, The Apple.
So, from the lovers, the dreamers, and us.
Live long and prosper, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the MuppeTrek podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.
This podcast has been brought to you by A Play on Nerds.